And good evening and welcome back, my lovely commanders and interlopers and gra people and general writers and waffle consumers. I think that was a very, very good intro. Well done. It's good to be back. It's good to be back. I know it's I'm getting some weird morphing effects from my green tea. There's something slightly. Hang on, let me just adjust this because that's. I've noticed this before. Every so often the camera seems to slowly overexpose. I'm not quite sure what's causing that. Let me just have a play with a filter here because, I don't want to look like a complete nutter. Well, any more than I have to. Let's just have a quick. So many wretched buttons to press on these things. There we go. Maybe fade that. Oh no, everything's gone green. No, that's not right. It's a bit slow to react. Let's try that. Ooh, 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 ooh. Nope. Oh, there we go. It's somewhere about there. Let's try that. Is that good? There we go. Right. So I don't get this. It's the same room with the same computer, with the same lights, with the same green screen, with the same settings, and yet suddenly everything's different. So why do computers do that? Computers are supposed to be logical. So computers are supposed to do the same thing with the same input, right? I don't understand it, but never mind. There we go. Use reflected light. Yeah, I am actually using reflected light. These lights are not pointing at me direct. Maybe they've been bashed by something. Maybe that's it. There we go. Let me just turn them off aside. There we go. Yeah, it looks like maybe somebody's bashed them. There we go. Yeah, maybe somebody's bashed them. There we go. I've tweaked them off to the side. There, that helps. Anyway, right. Let's do the. Let's do the roll call because that's the thing that we do on this stream. So welcome one and welcome all. So Wintermute GB is here, Haunted Loaf is here, Coltrane Durr is here for first time chat as well. So welcome to you. Cyril Meechan is here as well. Our Conan 1 is here, fresh from the battle for Arrakis. It's not going very well for you guys, by the way. I'm getting near the end of June. It's not going well. Sean is here and he's turned his Alexa off. Darn. Glenn is here, Commander Terraformer. Web Metal Reese is here as well. Naughty Hill is here. Commander Tragic Blue 21 is here. Excellent, good to see you, sir. DO 977, DJ Squibby, Mac Verick, Pete SB, and has found me an Airwolf base. Excellent. Oh, I look forward to that. Oh, that'll be on Thursday. Too much. Yeah, so maybe somebody's bashed my thingamajigs. Anyway, there we go. Shadow Wyvern is here. Alan is here. Everyone here is here. Everyone who is anyone is here as well. Commander Lenslark is here, and Aria is here as well. 5 alarm 799 NLV. That's quite a username. Anyway, welcome one and welcome all to the Am Writing kind of writing community. It's a very unofficial title. There's absolutely no officialness going on here at all. I just appropriate the hashtags because that's what you do with hashtags, right? Anyway, if you're new to the stream, welcome. This is a very light-hearted, friendly, waffly sort of a place, okay? So don't be surprised we don't get to the subject of tonight's discussion in good order. In fact, in some number of occasions, we haven't actually got to the subject of tonight's discussion at all. And I don't reveal the subject of tonight's discussion in advance because sometimes I haven't figured out what it's going to be, but mostly because I like to keep you all on tenterhooks. That's just the way it goes. So it's a very light-hearted stream, and those of you who've been on here for regular amounts of time will know it's just a place to sort of chill out. Okay, it is ostensibly about writing. So sometimes we talk about the actual process of writing and generating books and publishing and all the different guises. Sometimes we even have very interesting streams about streams about grammar. All those sort of things. So any aspect of the process of telling stories and converting them into books of any kind is fair game, basically, for this stream. So we tend to wander around all over the place with no particular direction in mind. It's just an interesting place to kind of hang out. So grab a cup of tea or coffee or some stronger beverage if you think you'll need it, and just kick back and chill. If you don't want to say anything in the chat, absolutely fine. If you do want to say something in the chat and join in, then obviously feel free. If you want to track ask any questions about any kind of topic relating to writing, then yeah, absolutely. I am by no means a qualified guide. You'll be pleased to know. I just love telling stories. Okay, so I've been writing since the age of about 13. I'm a little bit older than that now, as you can probably work out. I've written myself. I think I'm 9 books in now, and I'm on my 10th, so I'm not doing too bad, and I'm still going. And you know, amongst all the, I mean, I've got my hat pinned straight. I mean, that's just wrong, isn't it? Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, and amongst the people on the stream, there are various people who've done all sorts of different writing as well. So it's kind of just a chill place for authors, writers, anybody who desires to be an author, writer, to hang out and kind of do stuff. So that's what we're all about. Just in case anybody on here is going, "What the hell is this that I've just stumbled into?" That's what it basically is, if that makes sense. So there we go. Anyway, so good evening. Anyway, 5alarm 799 NLV. Good evening, and JP Biggs as well. 07. Good to see you too. In case anybody's wondering, 07 is a salute from a computer game called Elite Dangerous. So you kind of got to imagine a sort of O, and that's a 7. Yeah, I don't know. I never understood it either, but there we go. In fact, it's a left-handed salute, isn't it? So let's cover that one. Who uses left-handed salutes? Sounds like something slightly dodgy going on there. But anyway, just notice the hash symbol looks remarkably like a waffle. I suppose it does a bit, doesn't it? Yeah. It's actually a Celtic symbol of which I can't remember what it means, so somebody will have to look it up. Maybe it's a hashtag. Maybe I'm wearing a hashtag. So there we go. Glenn says, Drew, did you ever hear back from that Twitch employee guy who way back when there was a creative tag was interested in our book writing on stream? It seems they just disappeared. Yeah, I don't know what happened to Twitch. Twitch goes through things that every so often changes the available hashtags. So I'm having to use one now that's basically called Just Chatting, which actually... and the only reason I'm using Just Chatting is chatting. This happens to me a lot. Just Chatting is because there isn't one called Just Waffling. So yes, that's a problem. But Just Chatting is the only one you can kind of use if you're not actually doing anything, which kind of works quite well. And then you can put a tag though, I think, underneath, which I use for writing, which never used to be there. So they have moved a few things back. But no, I never heard back from them at all. Lady Chatterling's lover, yeah. I've actually read that book. For 1960s, it's surprisingly kind of like slightly eyebrow raising. Actually, I read it quite a while back. I remember thinking, oh, it'll be so tame by modern standards that it won't be at all surprising. And actually, it was actually pretty eye raising as a book, considering. And and I imagine in the 1960s or whenever it was published first time around, it must have been utterly shocking. To all those housewives and husbands and things of housewives at the time, who were it's worth a read in the historical context. It was quite kind of like, ooh, ow, oh, okay, right, fair enough. So anyway, so complete aside to all the other sides. So anyway, how are we all doing now? I must admit, I have made no progress on my own personal writing this week at all. So for those of you thinking, oh, Drew's always got it made, he's got his roadmap, he's got his plan, he always gets down there and does some writing. Nope. No, I made 0 words this week. 0 words between this Monday and last Monday. My excuse is my tooth, okay? I do wisdom tooth extraction in middle age, no stars, don't recommend. I have been in pain. I have been in a lot of pain actually, and it comes and goes. It seems to have subsided now, and I think I'm on the mend now. But up and down this week, it has been pretty dire. And I'm not necessarily a complete stranger to pain, but I haven't had pain like that for quite a long time, and I've forgotten how limiting it is in terms of not so much just general activity, but anything that requires some thought and some concentration. Pain is just. It's an absolute nightmare. You just can't concentrate. I can do mundane things perfectly okay, but I kind of almost sign myself off work because I just can't do this. I can't concentrate on the documents. I can't concentrate on the files. I can't concentrate on anything. It was not very good. So 0 progress. So I'm now behind schedule, which is where I normally am, to be honest. But there we go. I thought you were going to... so you type... No, I don't type with my tooth. That would be very, very bad. So, but yeah, I'm on the mend, but I'm not out of the woods yet. I've still got what I've got now is apparently I haven't had the dry socket thing, which was the thing that everyone tells you, oh, watch out for the dry socket. But I haven't had that, but I have had the sort of really stiff jaw where you can't open your mouth, which isn't good for eating, and it's just really, really painful. So yeah, and then the ache kind of moves around your jaw, and it goes up here, and then it triggers your ear off, and then your head goes funny. It's not been good, so I don't recommend it at all if you can avoid it. Tooth pain is the absolute worst. Yeah, it wasn't fun, Cornish people. You're quite right. I have been feeling a little bit sorry for myself. I'm ashamed to admit. And how much did the tooth fairy give me? Nothing at all, alas. Dear. So I thought you were going to blame playing with your cars. No, I haven't really had. Actually, the those who know my cars, my MX-5 goes back on the road tomorrow. So I am actually looking forward to that. I haven't been able to drive it yet, despite getting it out of the garage, getting it ready to go, because I refuse to spend an extra month's worth of tax on the car. For those of you who know how the UK car taxing mechanism works, I refuse to pay an extra month without actually getting anything. So I've basically not taxed it until tomorrow, which is obviously the 1st of Feb. So I've been carless for the last week as well, but it's all ready to go. So that will be back on the road tomorrow. So that will show me up. Dr. O'Connor Brisbane. Alcohol's actually surprisingly good at numbing pain. I mean, obviously it is anyway. We know that, but various combinations of spirits and beers have worked quite well, other than some slightly well documented after effects that some of you may be aware of. Yeah, so that's a problem. Grinding your teeth while sleeping. Yeah, no. So I haven't been doing that. I don't think I have that problem. No, it was a wisdom tooth extraction that I had. A week and a bit ago now, a week and a half, and it's just about calming down now. So I had a wisdom tooth out, which was badly impacted somewhere up here, and it'd been fine for like 30 years, and then suddenly last year it decided to give me some grief. But it's all good. Stumpy, Maru is a dentist. Well, actually, it's interesting. I've been having a few kind of tweets and various things from people who have recently been finishing off the Shadewood series, basically asking for more. Now, I am working on it, but it's going to take a while for me to get kind of through that. And like I said, I haven't made any progress at all. So for those of you who struggle to make progress during the week, I didn't make any progress either. I'm going to have to catch that up somehow along the way, which is it's annoying. But yeah, I think you've got to have a realistic appraisal of how much you can get done in the week. For most of us, writing is something that obviously we love and sometimes hate in equal measure, but mostly we love. But it does have to be slotted around everything else that you have to do. And also last week I had one of the guys I work with, he was struggling with some bits and pieces that he was dealing with. And so I picked up some of his workload as well, which of course totally trashes any other spare time that you might have had available as well. So it wasn't a good week in terms of writing. I got absolutely nothing done at all, which was a bit irritating. But there we go. So other than that, all good. So I'm on the mend in terms of the pain. That seems to now be subsiding. And I feel a bit more like myself than I did last week. So because I was so heavily dosed up on painkillers last week, I'm not sure if I did what was. I haven't actually watched my stream last week to see if I made any sense whatsoever, or any more sense than I normally make. So it was a bit of a strange one, but there we go. Cyril Mitchin says most people would rather wait an extra week or few than expect not to aim for word count over quality. While they might. No, and I agree. I mean, you've got to write when you're able to write, and sometimes you can be in a place where you just really, really go for it, and lots and lots of words come out, and sometimes you can get completely stuck. It's a very strange thing, the ebb and flow of the whole writing process. Skytex, you made sense. Glenn says, do you have a goal or set number of hours you put aside specifically for writing? I'd like it to be like that. I aspire to be able to do that, but it doesn't work out that well, unfortunately, because I do a lot of sort of self-employed piecemeal work to kind of pay bills and keep lights on and things. I haven't got a great deal of control when that arrives. So I try and snatch writing time around various other bits and pieces. Sometimes I am able to block some time out, but I don't always find that works very well because what happens, if I block some time out for writing and I go, right, now it's writing time, my brain goes, no, it's not. I'm going to think about something else. And it's like, no, we've got some time to do some writing. And your brain's going, no, I'm not inspired today. Look, this is our writing day. Nah, not working for me. So it's a fickle mistress, actually. Am I allowed to say that? It's a fickle thing. Let's stick with that. In the sense that sometimes I can be, I've got half an hour. I've really got to bang this idea out. Or I've had sometimes I wake up in the morning. I think, I've just solved that plot conundrum. I need to write it down. I have to get to the keyboard fairly quickly before it evaporates. And sometimes I can book myself some time and it works. Sometimes I can book myself time and not much comes out of it and it's a bit annoying. So it's a really odd thing. I don't know what. I haven't quite found my perfect muse yet. I think if you carted me off to a nice beach with a nice sort of hut and a little bit of Wi-Fi for for research and stuff, and they just supplied me with endless cups of teas with no other interruptions, I think I might be quite productive. But alas, I don't live in that world yet. So I don't have a particular goal. I do keep track of word counts because that to me actually is quite a useful progress indicator. For those of you who know how I write, I do edit as I go along, which an awful lot of people say don't do. So if that makes sense to you, then obviously don't do it. But I do. I like to edit as I go along and tweak things, and because I feel like I'm putting kind of when you're building anything, building a house or something, you put the blocks in and they need to be aligned, and it's much easier to tidy them up as you go. That's how I do my writing. So and we're into self-assessment time of year, so there's all that whole wretched tax business and all that kind of cobblers, and the year end's coming up, and it's just admin. I hate admin. It's just, there we go. Where do I get inspiration for my works? Now that is interesting. Some of it is reading astronomical stuff. So I subscribe to quite a few like astronomy online magazine type things like Astronomy Now and Space.com and all those sort of things, and they will occasionally pop up interesting bits and pieces as in terms of the background and all that kind of stuff. So I've always been interested in astronomy and space and that kind of thing, but most of the inspiration I think kind of drops out of my general imagination, because most of my stories, for those of you who know them, are character-driven stories. Okay, so it's usually people arguing with each other, having different points of view. Sometimes hating each other, sometimes loving each other, sometimes just being friends, sometimes kind of being, cold and aloof, but ultimately allied. It's all that sort of individual personal interaction. That's kind of where the heart of my stories are, and I think I just like writing people because because in the real world I don't like people very much. It's way too people and they're way too complicated and they don't do what they're supposed to do. Whereas in my books I can control exactly what's going on. So I am actually quite an antisocial person. I mean, may come of you sometimes as a surprise sitting in front of the screen chattering away, but I'm not a particularly personable person. I mean, I can be, but I have to put a lot of effort into it. In kind of face-to-face social circumstances, I feel very tired very quickly. I'm quite introverted. And I find generally people in the world, as I meet them, quite superficial. And I don't think they are. I think that's just our day-to-day lives make us a bit too superficial sometimes. And whereas in my books I can get into the heart of characters and things a bit more easily. So I think what's happening is I find it easier to express some of my own emotions and some of the emotions I see in others inside narrative and writing than actually in real life, which may or may not make sense to different people. But there we go. So where do I get inspiration? I literally just dream them up. I just think, wouldn't it be cool if they did that or that. Sometimes it is watching other films. I kind of go, that's quite a good idea, but I would do it slightly differently. I would do it like this. Then that gives me an idea for them. So cancel the pub gathering. No, you see, that would work for me. I mean, Sean, a bit of alcohol goes a long way in these sort of things. I think, if we all went down the pub and we all had probably a couple of pints of Guinness or beer or whatever, whatever poison you choose, not a couple of pints of spirits, that would be dangerous. A couple of pints of beer, then everything would be fine. Okay, all the inhibitions would be out. We're all having a good laugh. It's just that sort of stilted bit at the beginning. I think maybe. It just takes me a while to warm up. So where do I get inspirations? Definitely science fiction, sort of sci-fi kind of magazine things. imagination and watching people and imagining how they might interact is another one. So those are two things that give you. Stumpy says, do you take notes, record ideas when they come to you, so that when you sit down to write, you have all the inspiration right out? Yes, I do. So I have a notebook that I always carry with me, okay? So in case I'm suddenly, what about the thingamajig? Then I can write it down, because your memory, at least my memory, isn't good enough, okay, to remember the thing. And then I get really annoyed with myself if I haven't written down, because I can remember having a good idea, but then I can't actually remember the good idea. And that's really, really annoying. So I have a notebook, and I'll just scribble some ideas down. I've got a nice leather-bound notebook, actually. It's over. So anyway, you've probably seen a book before, so you know what one of those looks like. But yeah, I have a notebook that I keep around just in case I wake up in the middle of the night. What about the thing? Because it helps you sleep, actually. If you, at least it does with me, if I wake up in the night and I'm worrying about something, or something's buzzing around my head, if I write it down, it's sort of a subconscious thing with my brain. It's like my subconscious goes, aha, brilliant, Drew's written it down. We don't have to remember that thing now because it's in the book. We can pick it up tomorrow. And my brain kind of relaxes. I can sleep again. Whereas if I don't write it down, my subconscious seems to go into a loop of constant, right, we must remember this, must remember this, must remember this, must remember this, must remember this. You can't get any sleep. So writing things down that's on your bed is good anyway, but it's quite good for book ideas too. Judging by Maru, I assume you plan your characters by drawing a punch bag and filling it with words describing exactly how you plan to pull them. Poor old Maru. Justice for Maru, I know. I'm still not convinced I gave him a more hard time than any of the other characters. Somebody's going to draw me up a spreadsheet at some point and find out. Have a Boo Boo's here as well. How good to see you. So no, don't cancel the pub gallery. We'll do that at some point. We can all be in the pub with Drew on Zoom. No, that would be mean. Dr. Queston says, would you say you picture their characters first or their journey? Definitely picture the characters first, because I may have a bit of their journey mapped out in my head, or at least some sort of ideas, but I generally work with the characters first. So in Shadewood, the first character actually that came to me, I think, was Zoella. And you know, she was memorable because basically she was trying to be a nice person in a horrible world. And I remember thinking, okay, if we took somebody who's basically nice, you know, who's kind, who's generous, who's thoughtful, who's generally trying to look out for other people, and put them in a world where bad things happen because it's just primitive and not tricky and nasty and all that sort of thing, what would be the impact on that person over time? If you take them out of a sheltered environment where things are generally okay and put them into an environment where things mostly aren't okay, how long would that kind of genteel nature last? Would it, is it fundamental to that person, or would other things happen? So that's one of the first sort of ideas I came up with there. Kiri came up second because I wanted somebody who was basically kind of the other way around. Okay, she's actually not very nice. And just goes around not being very nice. And then Maru was much more a later sort of addition to kind of flesh out and have a means to tell the technical side of the story. So that's how it worked with Shade, but that's not always the way it works. But I generally do start with the people first. That's certainly what I've done with the next series of novels. I've gone through the what kind of people do I want to be writing stories about? Because for me, it's the people who are interesting. So I want to have an interesting character. I've just added one actually, who I was actually going to be a completely incidental character who just sort of turned up for a couple of scenes and then disappeared off. And then I was reading it back to myself and thinking, I wonder this character, I wonder where are they going? Are they important? Do they do something? And I was thinking more and more about this character than the two main characters that I've already defined. I was thinking, I think I'm going to have to add this one in because I'm interested in writing a bit more about what happens to this particular character. So I'm going to add them in. That's totally unplanned. So that's quite a thing. So that's that kind of. Sean says, I find that I hold the conversations for scripts in my head, or if alone, onto a digital record. That's quite a good idea. I mean, I haven't recorded myself, but I tend to write down because I find that quite useful. And sometimes I've written whole scenes, in rough, in pen and pencil. But so I think the idea of getting it out of your head and onto something, whether that's a digital recorder or a book or whatever it happens to be, is actually quite a good thing, because then it clears your brain up either for sleeping, which is obviously a very useful thing, or anything else that you need to be doing. Glenn says, I always seem to picture a journey first, and I'm not sure that is best. I find it hard to put characters and what kind into those settings. So, yeah, so I don't know if it's, I mean, it's like so many things in writing, isn't it? Is there a right way and a wrong way to do this? No, there's not. You know, it's kind of whatever works. I start with the characters because I find them interesting, and then I think, okay, what nasty things can I do to these characters? I can put them in some sort of jeopardy over here and some sort of jeopardy over here, and that doesn't always work out the way I want. But I tend to sort of use the situations as mechanisms to bring the characters together so they can, you know, have arguments, fall in love, have fights, whatever it happens to be that I want to do. So, you know, all those sort of things. That's kind of how I've always worked. I've always been interested to see, okay, what's that character going to do in this situation, and try and work out all those kind of things. Coltrane, what would be your advice for someone just starting out in science fiction writing? Starting out, piece of advice. The biggest, most important advice with writing in general is kind of twofold, I think, and this is not necessarily just science fiction writing, but just writing in general. Is A, don't give up, okay? Because there are an awful lot of obstacles ahead, and it will take quite a lot of perseverance to get through it, okay? So that's the first piece, don't give up. The second piece is be prepared to acknowledge to yourself that the first stuff that you write, unless you've got some specific skills in it and you've got already done some qualifications in it, the first stuff you write probably won't be all that good, okay? Just accept that and keep going, all right? It's like, you know, if you've ever heard someone who picks up a violin and starts playing it, it sounds dreadful, okay? But everyone's got to go through that dreadful phase before they get to being good at anything. You can't just pick up a violin and go, today I will be a virtuoso violinist. You just can't do it. You have to practice. It's the same with writing. You can't just say, right, today I'm going to be a brilliant author, because you won't be, all right? You've got to practice. You've got to work through it. So that's generic writing advice. For science fiction, I would say pick a topic that really interests you. I think one of the best piece of writing advice I was ever given, and again it's generic, is write the book that you want to read, okay? So for science fiction, I would take a concept that you love. I mean, it could be, I don't know, black holes, or it could be space exploration, or it could be life on other planets, or it could be some sort of post-apocalyptic thing, or, you know, whatever it is that you really love in the realm of science fiction, go and write something about that. Maybe, yeah, because that's going to help you to keep motivated. You don't want to write about something that you find quite hard or you're not particularly interested in, or, you know, all those sort of things. So find something that you're really kind of like, oh yeah, I'd love to write a story about a ship that gets sucked into a black hole, or, you know, whatever it happens to be. The particular area that you focus on, and don't try and necessarily write a full-length novel all in one go. Okay, maybe write a short story, maybe something kind of poignant. Maybe aim for 5,000 to 10,000 words or something like that, and see if you can make that work. And just then kind of iterate from there. That's probably how I would recommend people start, if that makes sense. Glock 19 says you can get ventriloquist dummy and carry on both conversations. Yeah. Well, actually, writing does make you, I think, a little bit schizophrenic in a kind of good sort of way, because I do entertain conversations between my characters in my head, which I'm not entirely sure is a healthy thing to be doing. But because I kind of, man, and I don't know. Do other writers do that? You have your characters in your head, and you can almost hear them doing stuff. I mean, there's something very strange about the fact that, you know, you hear voices in your head, and you have to commit them to paper. In any other place, that would be considered a sign of madness. But no, it's okay because you're an author. It's weird. I don't know. Is he mad? Is he hearing voices in his head? Yes. Does he write them down? Yes. Oh, that's okay. So, I don't know. Really weird. Cyril says, I like your style of writing characters as people who things happen to, rather than the collection of character cliches that happen to match the action in the story. It must be difficult to write multifaceted characters. I think that's what helps me in working out the characters in advance. So, for example, you know, again from Shadewood, Zoella was very much a character who is predisposed to be nice and caring, and that's her background is very much built around the fact that she's got this very warm, empathetic nature. Kiri was very much based around the fact that she'd been in a situation where if in order to survive you have to basically fight people to eat stuff. So she's very brutal and very impatient and doesn't have any time for anybody else at all, because as far as she's concerned, it's you live or you die based on the choices you make in that moment. So she isn't given to much consideration. Whereas Zoella will go back and evaluate things and try and work out the best way of doing something and take a lot of time to think about things. Kiri is very much not like that. And Maru is very impetuous as well. It's basically, as far as he's concerned, if it's new and shiny, it's got some technology and maybe some blue LEDs on it, then he's in. Okay, that's how he was. And then you've got other characters who you build up various bits and pieces over time. So I spend a lot of time on the characters early on. So I come up with an idea of, say for example, Zoella, who's she's basically quite nice. She's empathetic. She cares about other people. She wants other people to feel good. Why is she like that? Has she had a slightly softer upbringing? Has she come from a place where actually it hasn't been too bad, or maybe she's just worked through a lot of adversity and decided that what the world needs is more people who actually can fix things. And it was more the latter in Zoella's case. So I've gone back. Okay, so if a person is like that now, why are they like that? What's their upbringing been like, and kind of go back and trying to work some of those things out. So most of my characters have not only where are they now, but roughly the sort of influences that happened to them early on. And I do a lot of that in advance of writing any of the stories, because then I go, well, hang on, if Zoella was in that situation, she'd probably do this. If somebody starts arguing over there, Zoella's going to try and interrupt and go, guys, just stop arguing. Why are you always arguing? Just calm down. He's got a good point, you've got a good point. Why can't you just come to an accommodation? That's the sort of thing she's likely to say, because I know that's the sort of person she's likely to be. Whereas Kiri's going to come around and say, basically, I'm right, you're wrong, and if you disagree, I'm going to hit you with my stick. All right? That's kind of where she's coming from. And Maru doesn't like conflict. Okay, so he's going to be basically, I mean, you both make good points. I'm happy with whichever way you decide. So he's a bit of a wimp in that regard. So he's going to be kind of like trying to appease people and not try and get into the arguments in the first place. So when you've established traits like that, when you get into situations where things are tense in the situation, or at least you should have a fairly good, strong inkling how your characters are going to react in that situation. So when there's a crisis, Kiri's going to say, we do this, whether it's right or wrong. Maru's going to go, well, whoever's sort of shouting the loudest, I'll go with them. And Zoella's going to be thinking about the long-term consequences. We can't do that, because if we do that, then this will happen. And then you've got realistic interactions based on the way your characters kind of work, if that makes sense. That's how I do it. So that's hopefully why my characters come across as actually, they feel a bit more kind of nuanced and a bit more real. Glenn says, I think the most helpful thing I got out of our NSOC project was the feedback, critique and deadlines to motivate. So yes, motivation is a big deal. So I try and crack the whip myself. But sometimes it's very good to have encouragement from others to push that. And that's what's quite good about these streams and things, is that we can kind of encourage each other and, on Twitter, hashtagging each other and, be looking out for each other's work and the things that we're working on, because it does help push you forward. Because it's a very strange thing, writing. It's quite a solo profession in many ways. And there's a lot of stuff out there which is, maybe trying to be helpful but isn't so helpful. And there's some people, who still have this, hobby horse about, well, if you're not a proper author, you don't do it this way, and it's all junk, okay? If you've written a story or published a book in any form, as far as I'm concerned, you're an author, okay? So don't worry about that. There can be some snobby stuff going on out there, and we try to avoid all that sort of stuff in here, because it's all about telling stories. It's all about telling stories and expressing yourself. That's the important bit. Writing in a vacuum can be difficult, yeah. Metaphorical vacuum, yes, sorry. Very good, Alan. But those sort of things can be blockers as well. So don't get intimidated, okay? There's another thing, and this is probably advice aimed at possibly some of us on the stream who are perhaps a bit younger than me. It's very easy to be intimidated, okay, by people online who appear to be more successful or have the 10 rules to writing, all laid out, and I'm a successful blah 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 blah. So therefore you should listen to me. Okay, so take some of their advice if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense or you don't agree with it, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so don't be intimidated by that. Well, I've had books published by, because there's an awful lot of luck, all right? A huge amount of luck involved in publishing and being successful and selling lots and lots of books. Okay, there's an awful lot of luck, and all the successful people will tell you it was down to some amazing talent that they had and some process they followed, and that's all bogus. Okay, it's down to mostly luck. All right place, right time. Da 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 da. So just keep writing. If you enjoy writing and you enjoy telling stories, just keep doing it, because the longer you keep doing it, the longer luck has an opportunity to do its thing. Okay. Don't be intimidated. Just keep writing. So even if you're doing very small stuff, just go for it. Just enjoy it. So there we go. Bad guitarist. I'm trying to write a side podcast. Okay, well that sounds quite cool. I don't know where you'd even start with that, actually. So good luck with that one. Tell us how it goes. That's going to be quite interesting. Sean, every character has to have a backstory that feeds their current traits. I think that's true. I mean, you don't have to go into massive amounts of detail, and you may only be useful to you as the writer, because you need to kind of know that to make them come across correctly. But I think it's worth doing a bit of backstory. Why is this person here? What are they doing? What did they do just before the story started? So what kind of person are they? Have they had bad things happen to them, good things happen to them, indifferent things happen? Have they encountered failure or success in their life? Because how do they cope in a high stress situation? Do they come apart? Do they cope with it? What happens and why? All those sort of questions. I think are quite interesting things to explore a little bit in your characters before you start using them in scenes. Agreed there also with a mixture of random unexplained traits. So I mean I chuck a few of those in. So for example, with the Shadewood characters, you'll probably notice Kiri has a habit of always pushing her hair behind her ear when she's thinking, and I just use that as, okay, you should be able to tell, even if I haven't mentioned her by name, that was her. Maru will always Maru's a bit like me. It's kind of like squirrel. There's a new exciting thing over there. Wow, okay, let's go and have a look at that. No, what about the thing? Oh yeah, the thing. I suppose we should deal with the thing. What's that? And little mannerisms like that can be quite fun to make you. And you're part of you will be going, oh come on, dude, just focus on the thing. But it's correct for that character. All that sort of stuff. A lot of luck, says Glenn, but possibly also how prolific you are. More material out that gives more change for luck. Yeah, I mean, what's that? The old phrase, I don't know who says it. It's probably it's a desperately bad cliche, but it's probably true, like most cliches are. Chance favours the prepared mind, I think is the phrase. So the more stuff you have, the chance you have of it being noticed, right? It kind of stands to reason. So I think that's good. So consider things like cult classics as well. Just because you haven't found your audience, it doesn't mean they aren't out there. No, and I think that's good, because you can write something and then suddenly you can come back much later on and suddenly the thing, and then you can get a surge of interest. I mean, who knows? What's going to be good and what's going to be bad, and what does that even mean in the literary context? I mean, the fact for me, I'm not a desperately successful author. I've written a few books and quite a few people have read them, which as far as I'm concerned means. Yeah, that's pretty good. But I'm not. I haven't got a yacht, and I'm not jet setting over here to do book signings where thousands of people turn up. All that. Success could mean all sorts of things to different people. But from my perspective, I've written some books and people have liked them. So there we go. I've done the thing, and I like doing that thing, and I will keep doing that thing. So I think that's good. I think you need some talent and some persistence as well as luck. It took about 10 years before I got a short story published. So yeah, you need to work at it. Going back to my violin analogy, I think if you're not prepared to put in some hard graft, you won't get any good at writing. Okay, so writing isn't something you can be instantly good at. No matter how talented you are. I've always said, I appreciate talent, but I admire hard work. Okay, hard work means more than talent, because you can get to a talented state from wherever you are with some hard work and application. Some of us are blessed with talents right from the start, but they don't mean a great deal unless you're prepared to put in the work as well. Okay, so talent is one thing, but hard work is actually much more important. And as with any creative thing, whether it's piano playing, violin playing, driving a car, whatever it happens to be, the more practice you do, the better you will get. Okay, so I look back at some of my earlier stuff and I go, oh my God, look at that. That's not right. I could have done that much better. And of course you can, because you can look back at anything that you've previously done and gone, yeah, it was okay for then, but now I could do it much better. Writing is the same. Okay, so you will improve, and the more you do it, the better you get. And if you write what you love, there's almost certainly others who love what you love, and you will find them. Yeah, so and the internet has democratized that a lot. Okay, so it's easier nowadays to get stuff out there and get your name and your stories out there, particularly if people want to consume it, and then that's a case of tying up with the different types of readers that you hopefully will have. So there we go. There's a phrase, the ghost of the backstory. If you know the backstory, hey, Daddy Hoggy's here. Yeah, good to see you. If you know the backstory of the characters that influence what they do, say how they act, it becomes consistent. The reader gets a feel of it, even if subconscious. Yeah, that's very good, because you can then build a picture of the character in the reader's mind, and the reader picks up your subtle clues as to what kind of person that you're actually dealing with. So that's really good. MGL1206 says hello. Hello, good to see you. And Coltrane, thanks for answering questions. Got to return to work. Well, hope the work goes well. Obviously it's UK evening here, so I'm hopefully stopping work, but I appreciate people tuning in from all across the globe. So another wonder of the internet. But have a good day at work, my friend. Be good. I'm afraid the opinion that hard work can lead to success has become somewhat unpopular since Molly May Haig's backlash. I don't know what that is, actually. I'm going to look that one up. Okay. So, yeah, it's no guarantee. But, don't expect... I suppose my point is don't expect to be instantly brilliant at something. Because unless you are remarkably blessed, then that's unlikely to happen to you, I suppose. Commander Terraphobe, what are your first seed elements to creating a character based on people you meet, or just generic elements like nice, frightened, strong? That's quite tricky, actually. What do I do? What I do is I quite often experiment with some things and basically put a couple of proto characters, if you like, into a situation and write a scene and see what happens. So I might do a test scene with a slightly cliched kind of a character. So let's pick out what I'm working on at the moment. I've got a slightly naive sort of space cadet type and a bit of an irascible professor. Okay, so they're a little bit cliched kind of things. But then what I'll do is I'll write some dialogue between the two of them and then sort of see how it goes and go, actually, well, I can refine that and I can refine that, and then maybe some ideas for the backstories of these characters will start to present themselves to me. So quite often I use little test scenes between characters to kind of explore how they act, and sometimes they surprise me. So you'll suddenly come up with maybe a slightly belligerent comment and go, okay, well, heck on, that person is a little bit kind of testy under certain conditions, doesn't like being contradicted, or that person is hiding something. Oh, why are they hiding something? Okay, so maybe this professor isn't so much a professor after all. Maybe he's not actually a professor at all. You can start playing around with things like that. That's how I tend to do it. If I'm stuck for a bit of character interaction, I'll put them into the scene as is and then just play the scene around a little bit and see how it goes. So that's a technique that I've used. But usually I start off with basic things like angry and bitter and kind. I do start off with some of those very basic, quite brightly coloured emotions, and then paint the pastels in around the edges, if that makes sense. Stumpy, now there are so many self-published books, is it even harder to stand out from the crowd? I think that is a problem. Because if you look at Amazon and go, how many books are there on Amazon? There's like millions now. How does somebody find your stuff? How do you market yourself in a world where everybody can market themselves? Very difficult to answer that question. The only way I've found to do it is just keep doing it. What seems to work well for me is that if I publish a book and then I publish another book and then I publish another book, I just keep going. And I've been doing that for about 10 years now, and all the time I get a little bit more of an uptick each time I do it. So I think that helps. I think going to conventions, if it makes sense in your local area, that can help as well. Obviously being on social media is a thing. Going to things and trying to volunteer to speak on things, anything like that can help. Differentiate yourself. The biggest thing, though, I think, is simply sticking at it, because most people don't. Most people don't get as far as the first book. those who do get as far as the first book don't usually get beyond that much beyond. So by keeping going and building a community of people who like your stuff over a longer period of time, it's a slow burn, but it's the only way that I've really discovered that it works, if that makes sense. Because I think if you write one book and expect to be, successful, it's like everyone's read it and go, yeah, that was good, what's next? And if you haven't got an answer to that question, people will drift off to whatever the next thing is, right? So, you've got to kind of keep going with it. I don't know, is that a good answer? I'm not sure. That's kind of how I see it. Lucky Luigi's here, yay, good to see you. Okay, so this was the Molly May. Okay, so you said that hard work leads to success and was bullied online for saying as it supposedly ignores the disadvantages faced by minority communities. Okay, so you can. I don't. Well, okay. I probably don't want to prejudge that one because I haven't read much about it. But I don't see how hard work disadvantages anybody. Hard work is hard work. Okay, if you start from an advantageous position, you may have to do less hard work. I understand that, but hard work is still hard work. So I'm not sure. Be interesting to see. I might check that one out actually. I'm gonna grab it from your tweet and look it up afterwards, if that's all right. There we go. Glenn, do you start with actual character sheet or just put them in your heads straight away? So I know I do start with a character sheet and then I add to it. So I'm a very visual sort of person. So I quite often, I mean, it sounds a bit dodgy, but I quite often use Google Images or some of the free, some of the image libraries that you can find online, and just type in keywords like, I don't know, angry woman, or bored man, or arrogant professor, or things like that, and just see what Google comes back with. And sometimes it comes back with, and I look at the characters and go, well, they look interesting. I quite like them, and I wonder what they're thinking in the picture that I can see, and then that triggers me with, they probably do this, and maybe there's this backstory, maybe they're hiding this, and maybe this happened to them a few years ago and they're really bitter about, all those sort of things sort of flow out of imagery. So I use a lot of imagery early on to kind of inform my ideas of what the character's like. Dr. Quest MD, how to handle influence from other existing works? Ow, okay, this is a good question. Is there ever a moment in the writing process where you think a character or plot point is too similar to something you may have watched, read? Do you disregard those moments because it's your own thing, or do you edit to change it up? Well, I think it's really, really hard nowadays not to be influenced by something. And I think it's something that you probably, you can worry about it too much, because I've come up with what I thought were unique ideas, only to find that somebody else had come up with the same idea independently and beaten me to it. Okay. Now I had, give you a good example of that one. I had a scene in one of my books that I wrote down and put in, and it's in the book, where everybody turns up to a wedding and gets slaughtered. All right. Now you may think, hang on a minute. I've heard of this one before. And when I watched Game of Thrones, that particular episode, the Red Wedding episode, I remember thinking, damn, that's really, really good. And damn, that's exactly what I did. And damn, no one's going to believe I didn't copy that. And yet I didn't, all right? But it was kind of like, it was done and dusted by this point. And there was nothing I could do about it. So you can try to avoid things, but it may be impossible to avoid them. If you're going to write a sci-fi story about a spaceship that's going out into the galaxy to explore and chart planets and moons and stars out there that nobody else has ever been to and seen, there may be some similarities. Okay, if you're plotting a major sort of space opera epic where hugely powerful creatures go out into the universe and fight battles with each other with astonishingly complicated technological creations in a battle against all odds and rescue the princess, an awful lot of these stories, it's very, very difficult to break new ground. It's very, very hard in fantasy. I mean, we concentrate on science fiction again quite a lot here, but it's very, very hard in fantasy. Okay, so what do? If you start off with elves and dwarves and anything like that, you're instantly in a situation where, okay, well, it's just another Tolkien ripoff, right? It's very hard to do something entirely new. It's not impossible, but very hard. Okay, if you want to incorporate any of the pantheon of things that are out there, very, very difficult. You bring a dragon in, it comes with baggage, right? You bring a dwarf in, it comes with baggage. You bring in any kind of energy weapon from a science fiction universe, it comes with baggage because it's probably been done in some fashion before. So there's a lot of exactly. If you're planning on doing a sci-fi story where knights use laser swords, it's very, very difficult. So to be honest, I wouldn't get too hung up about it. If you are pinching bits of dialogue, bits of description, and maybe spaceship designs, and you haven't done your own thinking, you've just sort of copied somebody else's, i.e. you're kind of doing fan fiction. If you're honest with yourself and say, I'm writing some fan fiction, then just do that. However, if it is your own work, then you need to steer away from anything that's obviously plagiarism. Okay, so there's a fine line between being inspired by and plagiarizing something. I'm noticing with my current one, I want to set my current story is a sort of space opera thing. So I've got spaceships and stuff that's happening between planets. It's really difficult to avoid anything because there's only so many ways spaceships can go between planets, right? And I must admit, in the computer games I'm playing, I'm always having a bit of a chuckle because each computer game needs to get a spaceship from point A to point B in some fashion, okay? And they've all got their different names, but it's basically the same stuff, okay? It's basically some magic space drive that gets you from point A to point B in a short period of time, and technically breaks the laws of physics. So you've got in No Man's Sky, you've got the pulse engine. In Elite Dangerous, you had the frame shift drive, and in Star Citizen, it's called the quantum drive. Okay, so what you do is you basically take some technical word and then stick it in front of the word drive. Okay, and that's your job done. All right. Okay, how it actually works, nobody really knows, but it's the something drive. Okay, whether it's the fusion drive or the quantum drive or the pulse drive or the frame shift drive or the catalytic drive or the aquajet drive or the very, very confusingly named and difficultly inexplicable drive, or just the improbability field. All those sort of things. It's very, very difficult. But try and come up with something that is self-referentially yours if you can. It's difficult. It's difficult. But don't get too hung up on that question because, what makes your story unique probably isn't the tech, and probably isn't the background necessarily. If you can work around the plot and work around the characters, I think you're going to find that a better place to differentiate yourself rather than the spaceships, because anti-gravity, warp drive, hyperdrive, all those things, it's all been done to death. Okay, we've got to get from point A to point B using some kind of technology in a spacey kind of game. And then in a fantasy game, magic, it can work in sorts of different ways, but how many times have you seen a fantasy show on television where when they wave their hands around, some sort of mystical flowy stuff comes out of their fingers and then zap it, it makes lightning or something. All those sort of things are very, very derivative of each other, and that's okay. That's okay. Sorry, that was a long answer there. Well, it's probably a short question. Physician says, first time chat as well. Hello, Physician. Good to see you. How do you discover and decide that writing was something worth putting all your time into developing? I didn't, actually, is the honest answer to that. There's something in me that likes writing and isn't satisfied unless I am writing. Does that make sense? Writing isn't so much to me a vocation or a job as it is a thing I just find I need to do. The fact ultimately that other people like reading my stories is kind of almost incidental. I like crafting stories in word format. I just find it's something in me that I have to do. It's me expressing myself. This is Dru's view on the world. This is Dru's way of doing something. I don't know. Writing is a very odd thing. I don't do it because it's a lucrative thing to do, because it isn't. I don't do it because it's an easy thing to do, because it isn't. I don't do it for fame and fortune, because I've kind of got neither of those. I do it because I can't not do it. It's a very strange thing. I can't really define it any better than that. I don't do it for any sensible, logical reason. I do it because I can't not do it. Does does that make sense? I don't know. That's trying to be as honest as possible with that one. So there we go. To Zebra, I've been told to place a piece of yourself within to make the flow easier when writing. What are your thoughts towards this? I think a book does do that. I think, I'm not to go all Harry Potter sort of Horcrux on you, but I think every author puts quite a lot of themselves into their book, actually. So if you're reading my stories and listening to my characters and understanding how my characters work, you're in a very strange way, you're getting a sort of subconscious echo of me. And to answer that question a different way, do you mean a piece of myself as in, do I see myself as any of my characters? No, I don't do that, because that's a little bit too sort of self-aggrandizing for me. Some authors do it. They put themselves in the story, and there's that danger of being a bit wish fulfillment-y and that kind of thing. None of my characters are me. They may have traits of me, but my overall concerns, the things I'm worried about, the things I think are important in stories, are definitely in the stories. And I suppose it's, that my stories are usually about characters doing some sort of self-realization and coming together and having relationships and things. And those things are important to me. So those maybe come across in the story as something that I put in there, if that makes sense. Cyril says he's got to go for social biz in the real world. Excellent. Enjoy. And the Red Wedding is partially inspired by the Black Dinner, a real event where guests at feast were massacred. So it's very difficult to come up with an original idea, okay? And sometimes just pinching a few ideas and making them your own. And sometimes I do genuinely watch sci-fi films and go, that's a really good idea, but I would have done it differently. I'd have done it like this. And then maybe I think, maybe I can just get away with writing it my way round. I did see a scene, I can't remember which film it was in. It wasn't a sci-fi film, where basically there was a dinner and somebody challenged somebody to a duel over the dinner. And there was therefore a resulting fight, and the dinner table got trashed, and all the other guests were thrown aside as this fight was going on. The fight went on for ages, okay. And I remember thinking, that's not how I would do it. So I did write that scene myself. So there's a scene where Kiri, I think it's in book 3 of Shakespeare, where basically she faces off against somebody who's challenged her. She gets challenged to a fight, and she basically says, okay, we'll fight. And he says, right, we'll fight at dawn. And that's what happened in the this thing I was watching. And I remember thinking, no, Kiri's not going to wait for dawn. She's going to do it there and then. So she said, no, I'm not waiting for dawn. We'll fight now. She just picks up the knife off the dinner table and basically says, come on then. And then they have the fight, and she basically kills this guy virtually straight away. She doesn't mess around. She gives him no chance to have an honourable death. She just stabs him to death, leaves his body on the floor, and then goes back to the dinner table and finishes up her dessert. And I thought that was a much cooler way to kind of explain who Kiri is. It's just, okay, he challenged me, he died. And and so it was a modification of something I had already seen. So there we go. Alcubierre Drive, so there's always a new way of doing things, isn't there? I started to write a short story a few years back and realised I was basically copying spaceship ideas from Elite. It's very difficult not to copy something. And a Haunted Loaf, that's a really good point. A completely original idea can be very confusing for you. Sorry, I'm a bit behind on the chat now because I've been waffling. A completely original idea will be very confusing because you've got to explain a lot of stuff. And explaining stuff in a story slows it down. So in some ways, that's why, for example, in the fantasy genre, if you just start out with elves and dwarves and dragons and trolls, everyone knows what an elf and a troll and a dragon and a troll is in general terms. You can put your own little spin on how all that kind of works in that story, but everyone kind of already has a grounding in those things. They don't need to worry about it. In the same way, if you say your spaceship has got engines and lasers and missiles and shields, everyone's kind of, okay, I know how that works. You don't need to go into any of the technicalities. Whereas if you start off with something completely left field, I mean, it may work, but you're going to have to help your readers. What the hell's going on in this story? And find clever ways to get that started, and that may take some time to connect up with the story. It's difficult, because on one hand you do want to be original, but to be original, and throw away everything that's kind of gone before is tricky. So sometimes just taking facets of things is good. So, for example, in Shadewood, in my series, In Space, as it's going to be the next piece of writing, is I've made a very big effort to try and stick with the laws of physics. Now, I can't do that entirely because I need some level of fast travel around, the universe in order to make the story work. But certain things I'm drawing the line at. So, for example, there isn't any anti-gravity plating. Okay, I don't need anti-gravity plating, and that's a bit magic-y to me. It's jolly convenient for special effects, but it's not very realistic. Okay, the same with shields in space. Okay, that's not very realistic either. You can have certain deflection technologies. The ships in my universe are going to be quite low tech compared to, let's say, Star Wars, Star Trek kind of stuff, because the idea of having a force field around your ship doesn't really work with physics properly. So you're going to just have a ship that's actually armoured physically, which is then a payoff between weight and acceleration and all the other bits and pieces. So I'm taking a bit more of a low-tech approach to my spaceship design than a lot of sort of TV shows and books necessarily would. But that's my choice because I'm trying to stick with real physics where I can. So there are a lot of limitations of what I can and can't do as a result of that, which I have to work around and deal with, but that worked out okay for me in Shadewood. It may not work out okay for the kind of story that you want to tell. You may want to have shields and you may want to have slightly fantastical elements in your story because that's what you need. Physician, to be fair, I doubt most people could even say how a combustion engine works. I wouldn't worry about explaining everything. Well, and that's an interesting point because quite often people will do too much explanation of their pet technology, and sometimes it's just worth. The reader can pick up pretty quickly. Okay, so the Wagar drive clearly catapults you from point A to point B in a short period of time. That's what it does. How does it work? Does it really matter whether it uses compressed photons and anti-gravity flux capacitors? Because it's all nonsense, isn't it? All that sort of stuff. So, throw a little bit in, but your characters, and this is a very important piece of writing advice, your characters should be completely unbothered by the technical explanation of how the ship works, okay? Because they live in the ship, okay? So if you've been on a spaceship for the last 3 years, you're going to be very, very, very familiar with how it works, okay? Even if you don't know, even if your character doesn't know exactly how it works, they're going to be familiar with its operation, and it's going to be totally an ordinary background information as far as they're concerned. So they're very unlikely to say, the quantum drive, which uses a flux capacitor Wagar field, they're just not going to say that because that won't be natural for them. That's the same as us getting in we've used this before with this trip. That's the same as us getting in our car and going, let's just fire up the ignition system, prime the cylinders, make sure the fuel is pumping, and the remarkable combination of petrol with a stoichiometric ratio of 14.7 to 1 with the air will now propel us forward as we voyage off to Tesco's. We just don't do that, do we? We just get in the car and we drive off because everyone knows what a car is. And in the future, in our environment, everyone will know what a spaceship is. It doesn't matter how it works, it just takes off and flies somewhere, okay? So your characters will be in that mode. They won't need to explain anything because everybody they are interacting with knows what a spaceship is. They don't necessarily need to know how it works unless they're a mechanic who works on spaceships. And that's a different type of character you can introduce as well, if necessary. So it's that sort of thing, right? Those are all setting elements, and yes, the characters and the adventure tells the story. So I think it's more about the characters and the plot. Get to that as fast as you can, without labouring too much on the description and the explanation of how things work. A zebra says fossil is sprayed into a chamber while combining. Yeah, there we go. Zebra was already there. And Haunted Love's quite right. An explanation may be immersion breaking because the reader may be going, yeah. I don't need to know how the spaceship works. What's happening next? When do we get to the pew pew or the action or the exploding airlock or whatever it happens to be that's actually going to cause the problem? What happens next in the story? I don't need to know. Why are you telling me about anti-gravity? Just get on with the story. And you don't want readers turning over page and page and page of your book to get back to the story, okay? Because you've wasted all that time padding the book out. So there we go. I write because I have no choice. Exactly, that's exactly it, physician. Yeah. So, Gamers Cafe. Hey, Drew. Glad you seem to be enjoying Star Citizen. Just wondering if you're getting sick of ship interiors yet. Not yet. No, I'm absolutely loving ship interiors. They're the best thing since, well, sliced bread probably. I'm really enjoying it. I think, you know, why wouldn't you want to live and play around inside a spaceship? Because it's fun. Yeah, that's spaceships of all. Have I been tempted to write a piece set in the Star Citizen universe? How about getting involved with scripting some Machinima? I haven't, partly at the moment because my schedule doesn't really allow it. But I don't know. I could. I'd probably be interested in doing something like that. But I'd need to have a conversation with some people who actually were in a position to grant me access to do that, I suppose. Never say never. It's not on the plan at the moment, but never say never. I thought your wedding murder scene was inspired by Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Dear, all good stuff. And Mac Ferret would prefer no shields in games. You see, I think that to me it feels more realistic, but I like a bit more realism. Up until the point it gets in the way of doing things. So the Wagar drive runs on waffles and space tea. We already understand. Well, there you go. So you know how it works. You know, it just gets us from point A to B by a very convoluted route. That's the only problem with the Wagar drive. Speaking of warp technology, there has been a new breakthrough where DARPA have made worlds. Yeah, so I mean, there's always cool stuff, and you can riff off that, can't you? You know, if there's a real discovery in the discovery in the real world, you can sometimes riff off it and extrapolate a bit into the future. I mean, I did that with exoplanets. That's where the Shadewood universe came from. It's exoplanet research. Ian M. Banks and William Gibson never explained anything, and that works really well. And actually, in June, I've been quite surprised and sort of impressed actually by how little explanation there is of anything at all. The spaceships don't. You get virtually no explanation how the spaceships work in June. In fact, they don't even get described really in the book. They just kind of. One moment the people are on one planet, next moment they're on another planet, and the spaceship is clearly moving between the planets. But it's just like catching a bus as far as the characters are concerned. Okay, well we were on there last week and now we're here. And even the whole process of actually getting on and off the ship, it's not in the book. So I was like, part of me was kind of like, I kind of wanted a bit more about them, but it depends on what you're used to. So it's difficult. Those kind of things. I think you've got to find your own style, and sometimes that can be more heavy. So, for example, if you're like Arthur C. Clarke, then he does like putting some technical descriptions of how things work into his sci-fi novels, and I've quite enjoyed those. I like Arthur C. Clarke, kind of hard sci-fi, where actually the sci-fi is the biggest part of the story, and the characters are quite one-dimensional, really, by comparison. But I also like character-driven stories where the technology is kind of, it's there, but only for the needs of telling the story. Both have their place. And both can be really, really good and satisfying depending on what you're after. I think there's a bit of consistency needs to come through as well in that. And finding your style. What do you like writing? I think that's quite important for you as well. I'm not generally a hard sci-fi writer. I like hard sci-fi and the background of it, but I'm much more a character-driven writer. That's what I do, But yeah, that doesn't even mean that's what you have to do. Physician says, I'm a teacher. How would you suggest that teachers instill that need to write in children and encourage and develop it in spite of formal school requirements? Oh dear, formal school requirements. I mean, I don't know where you are, physician, whether or not you're in the UK or whether you're in a different country, but here in the UK it is utterly diabolical, some of the stuff that they have to learn at school in English. I mean, my wife is actually a home tutor, and she she quite often uses me as an example to the kids she tutors, basically saying, this whole, we have to, they have to learn, particular constructs like things like fronted adverbials, and I still have no idea what a fronted adverbial actually is. I think I actually do use them, but I couldn't. If you asked me to create a fronted adverbial, I would struggle. And I've written 9 books. So there's stuff going on at primary school in the UK that a published author doesn't know how it useful, how it works. And my huge concern is that they cram all this stuff into the curriculum, and it absolutely kills any enthusiasm for storytelling in kids from a very young age. And I don't think it's confined to English. I think it's our education system seems to just only work on can they do this tick, can they do this tick, can they do this tick, can they do this tick. It's soul destroying seeing these children coming out thinking that English and science and geography and all these other subjects are just literally, can you remember this fact? Can you identify this construct? Can you identify that? Can you give me an example of one of these? And that's all they can do, because that's all the education system gives them. So that is a huge problem. What would I suggest? I mean, the only thing I can offer as a suggestion in those spaces is finding them things to read that are appropriate for their age level. One of the greatest gifts I was given was age-appropriate books that kind of made me think a little bit. So, in the fantasy realm, I read things like The Hobbit. Now, I'm an old guy now. I'm 50 plus. But when I was a kid, I remember so clearly coming across The Hobbit and reading The Hobbit and thinking, oh my God, this adventure with dragons and gold and buried treasure and trolls and magic and wizards and stuff. And it completely blew my mind at the age of, I don't know, about 8 or 9. And if kids today could find books that really kind of brought them alive like that, that would be my fondest wish for them. But with so many competing things nowadays, particularly with technology and mobile phones and iPads and stuff, I think it's a real uphill battle trying to inspire them as teachers. I think can you find writers and authors who are prepared to come into school and talk a little bit about what they do? Maybe that's a helpful thing. Anything like that to basically show them that there's people who do write and have fun with these subjects, and find it really, really compelling, because so many of them come out with kind of English is boring, science is boring, geography is boring, it's just schoolwork as far as they're concerned, something they have to endure, which just sounds awful. I don't know. It's very, very tricky, because there's so many more distractions now and so much more kind of competition, and they have to cram so much more in to the curriculum nowadays than they used to. It's very, very tricky, very, very tricky indeed. On the subject of dedicating pages and pages to explain technical details, a lot more common in older literature. Moby Dick's a good example, and there's a huge amount of instruction on whales and the history of whaling ships and ships. And I suppose you maybe had to assume a lot less of what readers were familiar with in the olden days. Maybe that's true. I mean, I do remember thinking that with Jules Verne and H.G. Wells and some of that older literature. They do explain some of the concepts, because I assume that they felt that people they were writing for wouldn't have the faintest, foggiest notion of what they were talking about otherwise. I don't know, maybe that's something that's changed over time. And it can be a different style. I mean, if you're the sort of writer who does that, and people come to expect that of you, then they'll get used to it. I think that kind of makes sense. Physician, I am in the UK, and I agree the approach to teaching writing is mindless. If I was in charge of curriculum in the UK, I would emphasise putting a lot more emphasis on creative writing, and basically not doubling down on grammar and too many things like that too early, because the creativity's got to start, and if you just suppress it underneath, right, you didn't use a semicolon there, and you didn't use a full stop there, and you didn't capitalize this, and you didn't put the correct number of adverbs in and all that kind of stuff, it just sucks the joy out of things. The idea of, I told a story where the princess vanquished the dragon and rescued the whatever it happens to be. The joy of being able to tell a story that actually kind of works, to cultivate that in children, I think would be really, really worthwhile. But there doesn't seem to be any space for it, which is quite worrying. Of course, some people intentionally write very experimental and defy genre expectations, and that's fine as well. Yeah, I mean, some people can come up with some brand new stuff, and we all go, oh, wow, I wish I'd thought of that. that's really good. We should be seeing more of that. And without getting into too dangerous territory, that's where I think the diversity comes in as well, because there's an awful lot of people like me, white middle-aged men, from a relatively privileged background, and we've got certain stories to tell which are probably relatively similar because we probably have shared experiences and various other bits. Now, that's not to devalue anything that we come up with, but it's good to hear voices from all sorts of different social walks and places, because they may have an entirely new take on science fiction and fantasy novels that other people haven't. So I welcome that. I don't want to be lectured at, but I do welcome new voices, if that makes sense. I think that's important as well. How would you suggest making sure they understand its true value and purpose? Oh, that's put me on the spot here. True value and purpose. I think if you can find a way. I mean, I would choose some. I think the way, if I had carte blanche with children and writing, I would find some straightforward but emotionally quite strong stories, and get a talented person to read them to them in person. So not on a TV broadcast or a radio broadcast or a podcast or anything like that, but actually in person, and get them to get a talented reader to read an emotionally powerful story, age appropriate, of course. But something where maybe there's a little bit of tragedy, or maybe there's a little bit of there's a bit of nuance in the emotions and stuff that actually makes you think, or stories where there's a twist in the sense of, that's not what I was expecting to happen, and then explain to them that the art of storytelling is to make people feel things, is to make people go, that's not what I was thinking was going to happen, and get that slightly shock reaction, not in a bad way, but kind of just a kind of, I didn't realise words could do such things. That's the sort of stuff I would strive for, I think. I read Stranger in a Strange Land when I was 10 years old. So I mean, it's funny what you bump up against. I mean, I started reading Lord of the Rings at the age of 13, which arguably I was a bit too young to read, but I did manage it, and I do recall it okay. It went okay. And then you bump across other things that other people recommend and stuff, and it's a bit, your own writing journey starts, doesn't it? And reading journey starts. Glenn says, it seems to me the proliferation of movies and TV storytelling might inspire movie making in kids, but less so writing, because visual goes so quick to where and I think this is more symptomatic of our times, isn't it? Is that we're, as a culture now, we're less given over to consideration than perhaps we were, because there's so much pressure and constant interruption. Our attention spans are so not, I don't think because of our own fault, but simply because of our environment. Our attention spans are much shorter. Whereas when I was a kid, there were quite long periods of boredom, basically. Sunday afternoons, we generally, my family were quite traditional. We would go to church on Sunday morning. We'd come back, we'd have lunch, and then it was up to you to entertain yourself for the rest of the day. The parents would go off and do their own thing. My dad would normally go and read the newspaper. My mum would potter around, and I can't remember what my mum was doing, probably some housework, probably. And my sister and I were just sort of abandoned, really. Sunday afternoon, go and amuse yourselves. There's no organised activity, so it's just do whatever you want to do. Well, I don't know what to do. Well, tough, So to start with, we were bored, and then we go, actually, this is the best gift we've ever been given, because we can do whatever the hell we like. So, sometimes we go outside, sometimes I would go cycling, sometimes I would read a book, sometimes, and later on computer games came along and I would do those as well. But, so actually being in the situation where you don't have pre-planned activities, I think is actually extremely good for children, and that happens so rarely now, because every minute of their life is homework here, school there, pony club there, after school club here, all those sort of things, and there's just too much. They never get a chance to be bored, so they always expect to be entertained by something, and actually from boredom comes creativity, I think. I may be wrong on that, but that's the theory that I'm working on. So, Physician says, thanks for the answers, by the way. I appreciate your perspective. I'll discuss it with my pupils this week. So, well, good luck with that, Physician. Do report back on what they think. Because, the world I grew up in as a child is very different to the world that children are growing up in today. I don't know if it's better or worse, but it's certainly different. So I'd be interested to see what they come back with. On the other hand, I've seen people on writing critique sites who are very creative but find it hard to take any constructive criticism about their writing. Yeah, so taking criticism is an entirely different section, isn't it? That we should probably explore that in great detail at some point. Lucky Luigi, on the other hand, it's nice to talk to people who know what the boys of summer is now and again. Yeah, that's such a great song. Just takes me straight back to the 80s. What a brilliant decade that was. Dear, oh dear. You see, actually, Physician, just on the topic of school, I mean, I was very fortunate. I was rubbish at English up until secondary school. Okay, so up until the age of 14, I was very uninterested, okay, in writing and English in general, storytelling. What made the difference for me is I had an English teacher in secondary school who basically, it was a new year. He was, as far as he was concerned, I think he was starting from a blank sheet. He basically looked at us and thought, I've got no idea what these guys have been taught before, so I'm just going to start off from where I... Now, he was an older guy, but he basically said, right, first day of term back, English lesson, we're all kind of expecting a grammar check or a spelling check or something like that. And he basically said, right, write a story. About what? Nothing, doesn't matter, whatever you fancy, write a story. Just go. You've got 30 minutes. That's the lesson. Write a story. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it's about. Just write me a story, and that's the first lesson. Okay. Now you couldn't do that in these days of structured teaching and stuff, but that's what he did back in 1984. And our first English lesson was just write a story. So I remember thinking, I don't know, what am I going to write about? So obviously spaceships, right? So I start writing a spaceship story, thinking, well, I'm going to get into trouble for this. Anyway, so I handed it in, okay, and didn't think much more of it and went off and did all my other lessons, and then I come back to English, and it gets handed out, because it was a marked piece of work, and I opened my book, and for the first time in my entire life up until that point, I was confronted by this strange symbol known as an A, and I'd never ever got an A, right, in anything actually, I don't think, but particularly in English. And all it was A circle, see me after class. And I was like, am I in trouble or did I do well? I'm not quite sure. So anyway, I saw him after class, got very, very little me at the age of 13. And he basically said, that was a brilliant story, Wagar. Because it was always always done by surnames back in that day. Yes, sir. And he just said, so do you enjoy writing? I went, I've never done writing before. You said to tell a story, so I told the story. He said, this is a really good story. Have you ever read any Jules Verne? I went, no. Any Arthur C. Clarke? No. Any Edgar Allan Poe? I think he rattled off a whole bunch of sci-fi authors. So no, I hadn't. Okay, so it was, and so basically he took me down to the library at that lunchtime. Basically said, right, this book, read them, see what you think. Come back and tell me. And there we go. That's how my writing career started. So I can thank an English teacher who basically recognised a spark of creativity in me at the age of 13 to the fact that I write books today. Brilliant teachers. Okay, brilliant teacher. I got lucky there. So hats off to him. He died sadly a few years ago, but I was able to tell him, about 4 years ago that I had actually become an author. And oddly enough, because he was quite a cantankerous kind of guy, he basically said, well, I hope you write better stories than you did back then. So that was quite well, but no, he meant it in a kind way. So you just never know, and bless all the teachers, because they are in a position where they might be able to spark that creativity. So I hope that works, because it was very important for me, and I hope it's very important for other people as well. One of the problems with writing is it takes a long time to appreciate a book. You could spend 100 hours doing a painting and that could be understood in seconds. Yeah, so a book does require some effort to read, doesn't it, and comprehend and all those kind of things. You do have to put some effort in, and that's hard, I think, today, is because so many people A struggle for time. That's another thing. I mean, I've noticed it in the last 10 years. When I started out, and I think I mentioned this on the stream before, I started out, it was all paperbacks, okay, and maybe a few ebooks. Then it's moved towards ebooks, but my paperback sales, just in general actual things that I've sold, is dropping year on year in favour now of audiobooks, okay? So people are consuming my stories more and more and more in audible form, not in actual book form, digital or paper-based. And I'm seeing this as I think it's just a demographic change over time, is more and more people are basically saying, well, I can listen to the book when I'm on my commute, but I haven't got time to read a book. And, I present that with no particular ulterior motive other than it's an observation of what I'm seeing in my actual kind of sales figures. Books in the physical form or even the digital form as text are simply becoming less consumed, in my personal experience, in favour of actually listening to books. And I think that's the time-pressured nature of our society today is having a big influence on that. I don't know. Argue with me, please. Let me know. A book takes time. You can't do anything else when you're reading a book, which actually I find is a good thing. But, when you're... there we go. Blam Smith. When you're cycling, you can listen to a book. When you're on the train, you can listen to a book. When you're in the car, you can listen to a book. You can't read a book in those situations, right? So is that good? Is that bad? Does it matter? Because storytelling is storytelling, right? So there we go. I don't know. I think it depends on the individual. There's no right or wrong in being creative. This is generally very useful to hear. So I have a relaxed head teacher who trusts us teachers a lot of freedom to approach things the way I think is best. Okay, well, there you go, physician. So, experiment with prompting the creativity. I found the permission just to write a story in my English class with no kind of, right, we're going to be marking you on grammar and spelling and punctuation. Just write me a story with some people in it where, maybe give some parameters to make it a bit easier, but maybe let off the marking scheme in favour of, okay, I'm only going to give you marks for creativity today. I don't care about anything else. Creativity is the big thing, and see what you get out of your students. That would be really interesting to know. I'd love to hear what happens. So please let me know. That'd be really good. MSB UK one, I heard Amazon print paperback store. They do indeed, yes. So an awful lot of my stuff is done that since, when somebody buys a book, Amazon prints it on demand, which is quite an economical way of doing it, to be honest. It's sensible. And digital stuff obviously is a lot easier to transport and consume as well today. So, but yeah, personally, I've noticed a massive increase in the consumption of Audible stuff as opposed to print. It's just one of those things. Naughty Hill, here's the thing, I can read much faster than audiobook. And I find, interesting enough, even to me, the experience of, because I'm creating my audiobooks, right, but the experience of me reading it out loud quite often gives a different cadence to the story, even though the words are the same, than actually reading it. It's very hard for me to define exactly what I mean by that. And we've talked about books being converted to film and how that changes things, and books being converted to TV series and how that changes things. But even a straight read through of a book into audible form changes the story a bit. The medium alters the perception of how it works. And I'm not clever enough to capitalise on that necessarily in terms of taking advantage of the fact it's in audible form. But there are some things that you kind of instinctively go, actually, I think I need to do that in audible. So a really good example from Shadewood is when my characters are using their sort of mental transmission powers, it's sort of kind of a telepathy really. Then in the Audible book, I've put in a bit of reverb to give the listener a clue that they're not speaking out loud, they're speaking to each other within their minds. And little things like that give you a different perception of how the characters kind of work. It's weird, but it's the same text, but it comes across differently because it's now in audio. It's any dramatised version of a book changes the story that little bit. Quite interesting. Most people can read faster than the spoken word, but we have less time to dedicate to reading. And society changes around us, right? It's really, really weird. I wonder if there's such a thing as listening to a book with another person. Of course, reading is a solitary activity. Yeah, I mean, you can enjoy an audiobook together, can't you? I suppose that's something I hadn't even thought of, actually. That's a good point. All of you could listen to an audiobook in a car and share the experience of listening to a book simultaneously. That's a good point. Whereas a book is a solitary activity. I mean, I like nothing more. I generally have to have a cup of tea and a bag of strawberry bonbons, but curling up with a good book in the sofa, probably usually with the cat nowadays, because the cat quite enjoys the company, is my definition of heaven. No responsibilities, a long sunny afternoon, bonbon, cup of tea, nice book. Leave me there for 3 hours. I'll be absolutely fine. Thank you very much. That's my idea of heaven. But that may not be everybody else's idea of heaven. Some people can't take the solitude or the quietness sometimes, just being left alone with a book. It depends what you're used to. Interesting, really. Naughty Hill, I can let my fantasy flow with character voices, because you tend to voice different characters in a different way in your head, and that's another weird thing between the author and the reader, in the sense that I've come up with how I think my characters are, but when you're reading them, you're imagining them in your head in a different way, and neither of us are right or wrong in that as well. You've got your imagination, I've got my imagination. I'm giving you kind of cues and clues as to how this place works, but how you envisioned it, I don't know. That's your own personal interpretation of what I'd be reading. So there's that weird kind of mystical connection between authors and readers, in the sense that I dream something up, you read it, but you don't dream it in the same way that I dreamt it. But they're both correct, or they're both versions of a reality that we've made up together in a weird sort of way. It's bizarre. So there we go. So talking about audiobooks, I heartily recommend William Gibson's Alien 3. It's a total star. Excellent. That sounds good. I assume that's a good thing. A total star. And it's easier to listen to than to read. I suppose it takes less effort, but you do have to concentrate. I must admit, I was driving to, I think it was Norwich, at the end of last year for a business meeting, and I had in there. I think it was a Brian Cox. It was Brian Cox. Yeah, something about astrophysics anyway, about pulsars and neutron stars. And I listened to it for about an hour, and then I thought, actually my brain is actually beginning to ache now. So I had to switch it off and just put some music on, because I couldn't concentrate anymore on the metaphysical parallels of quantum mechanics or whatever it was. You can wear yourself out with audiobooks. It is possible. At least I can. So I don't know. It's interesting. We just consume things in a different way, but at the absolute basis of it, there still has to be that creativity. There still has got to be that desire, that very, very heartfelt internal need, which is quite, ineffable is probably the right word. It's very, very, very hard to define. Why do I want to tell stories? Because there's no particular reason. Why do people want to make up stories that aren't true? It's essentially what fiction is, right? I'm going to make up a story that didn't happen and tell it to you. And why do I want to do that? I don't know. And why do you want to read a story which isn't true? Okay, is it for the entertainment? Is it to learn something? Is it because it passes the time of day? Or is it just because you enjoy listening to stories? It's a very human way of interacting in a slightly more meaningful and sophisticated way than just plain conversation, isn't it? I don't know, what is it that connects all those things together? We just do seem to, some of us at least, do seem to have this need to tell stories. And most people are entertained by a good story, because maybe it takes you away from where you are at the moment, because maybe reality sucks a bit, or maybe you just like being transported to other places and times. Sometimes we like to be challenged in our way of thinking, sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's just a case of, I haven't thought of it from that perspective. Or, I would love to be able to do something like that, but I never will, because I don't live in the right place, or I haven't got access to those resources, whatever it is. But I like to hear stories about people who have done said thing. Sort of thing. Haunted Loeb says, the best way to use a talent for lying. I suppose it probably is. I also have trouble concentrating generally, but when I'm distracted by a book, it doesn't keep reading itself in the background. Yes. Whoa, stop. Yeah, I've got to keep up. So humans from ages past like to tell, make up, and hear stories, preferably around a fire. So there is a great long tradition of oral storytelling, and I think that's something that we still do. There's still this need to tell stories, to relate. Maybe warnings about situations in a kind of allegorical way, or teaching people in an allegorical way. That's part of it, isn't it? Sometimes it's just to entertain. Sometimes it's to warn of the folly of doing this or doing that, all those kind of things. They're all valid reasons for telling stories, aren't they? You reminded me of the Ryan George video. He's so funny. I really do like his videos. They do make me chuckle. Oh, really? Barely an inconvenience. He is very funny. You remind me of where the first guy to ever write fiction. So I say, this isn't true then. No, I made it up. Why would you do that? Isn't that basically lying? Yeah, it's really good, isn't it? No. Really good. It's a social thing, yeah. So but yeah, I don't know. I can't really explain why I find the need to tell stories, particularly stories that, and I'm some writers will write because they they want to put across a perspective. Okay, so this is a story about somebody in a particular type of situation because I think that story needs to be told so other people are aware of that situation. I get that. Sometimes it's a story of an unheard story because in normal circumstances the people might be oppressed and the story might get suppressed as a result. That I understand as well. I understand the allegory, reasons for writing stories about allegory. Let's take a situation that's actually really, really bad in the current world, and let's use a vehicle like science fiction to explore it without referring to it in its actual name. Lots and lots of science fiction is like that as well. Now, in my writing, I've tried very hard not to do that because I actually, I'm not very politically aligned. I'm not very nationalistic. I'm not very, at least I hope I'm not very bigoted or racist or anything like that. I take people as I find them, kind of really, and I kind of try and write my stories in the same vein. I don't try and teach people a lesson in my stories. I just write what's kind of coming up in my mind. I haven't got an objective in mind. I don't want you to come out the back of the Shadewood series going, excellent, Dru's enlightened me as to the error of my ways in the way I assess politics. That's not my intention at all with any of my books. I'm literally there to entertain you and give you some escapism. That is my kind of rationale for why I write. I want you to feel like you've been somewhere else, had some fun, watched some dramatic events and gone, that was, I'm back in the real world now, what a shame, It's designed as pure escapism and nothing else. That's my intention. Now, not all writers will be the same, but that's what I try to do. And all those things are valid. Whether you want to preach or whether you don't want to preach, or whether you want to, explain or whether you don't want to explain, or whether, all those kind of things. I think they're all important, different facets that different writers can explore. And what you want to do is obviously up to you. And different voices saying different things is important. But, for me, I'm just literally trying to entertain you. I'm not trying to do any more than that. I'm trying to pull at your heartstrings, and I'm trying to get you emotionally involved in the story and maybe provoke a bit of a reaction, but not any more than that, if that makes sense. That's, and that's my kind of choice. Luckily, Widget says, as to audiobooks, it falls somewhere between reading and passive entertainment, in my view, as far as imagination is required. Yeah, you see, this is the thing when, we talk about movies and TV. I like TV and movie adaptations of things, but sometimes I think they're better just written as their pure form in the start. Because, of course, one of the joys of things like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings to me was I could imagine what was going on because it was a book. Okay, so how I imagined it wasn't, isn't how you imagined it necessarily. So sometimes there's enough description that we've got some common ideas, but not always, and you can imagine things in different ways. Whereas the moment it's on TV or in a film, then it's set in kind of, there it is, it's on the screen, so that's what it looks like. Okay, in your imagination, has to take a bit of a back seat then, because you're being informed what the thing looks like. Audiobooks are slightly less prescriptive in the sense that, depending on how the audiobook is done. If it's a drama adaptation, you'll start getting the nuances of the characters and how they sound coming through. Whereas if it's just a straight read, you won't. You'll get it more like the original book was. So, again, how much your imagination can factor into the process will vary depending on the type of medium that it is. So all of those little things are choices in the way that you create stuff, which is quite interesting. And is reading a book passive? I mean, you're being told the story, so you don't get a chance to interact with it in a sense. Whereas I suppose something like Dungeons and Dragons, there is some narrative, i.e. you're being told a bit of a story, and then you get to react to it. Somebody mentioned earlier on the chat, I missed it, but the thing with the choose your own adventure novels, I used to love those as a kid. He basically says, you're walking down a forest path and the troll jumps out in front of you. Do you A, smack it over the head with a sword, or do B, you run away? And if it's A, turn to page 53, and if it's B, turn to page 8, or stuff like that. And so you could read a book, but your choices influenced the direction that the thing went. I used to love those books. I thought they were absolutely fantastic. Whether they're still a bit of a thing for modern kids, I have no idea whether they're still even, they would even recognise those sort of things. But those I found highly entertaining when I was a young teenager in particular. But that requires you again to read. Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. I mean, they were brilliant books. The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, and that's right, And what was the other one? There were quite a few of those. There was a whole stack load of them, weren't they? Dice books, that's right. So things like that really helped me with reading, because here was you can. It was sort of set in the first person, wasn't it? You are the adventurer, and the decisions you make. Blah 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 blah. And they were great fun, those books. I really, basically sort of a portable Dungeons and Dragons, weren't they? They brought some back as apps, have they? Okay, that's quite interesting. I haven't seen those. I mean, I don't tend to use my phone for things like that, but that makes sort of sense. I wonder how popular they are. Because again, still quite a lot of reading, right? I've still got about a dozen of them up. Mine must be somewhere. I don't know what happened to mine. There must be somewhere in the box. So that's quite interesting. I've seen many teachers of screenwriting in particular talk about having a philosophical arc as well as a character and plot arcs, which seems to infer a teaching theme is needed. Or a computer game with narrative and story-driven gameplay mechanisms. So people like to be entertained and to have a feeling that their actions are meaningful. I think that's important, in particular if you've got some kind of interactive storytelling. I think all those little things help. They don't, and it shows they haven't been humbled by discovering how many times you would have died in the story if you're allowed to make the choices. Okay, someone sent me a link then. Okay, I'll have to check that out. Thank you very much, Halted Low. And reasonably well reviewed. So, I mean, I wonder who's playing them. Is it older folks with nostalgia for days gone by, or is it younger folks picking them up, going, "Oh, this is a really cool idea." The Warlock of Firetop Mountain. Blimey, yes, I haven't played that for. Gonna have to go and look up, do some dice books on my stream. Yeah, that could be fun, couldn't it? Yeah, what should we do? Let's roll the dice. Rihanna Pratchett wrote one last year, did she? Oh, well, okay. Crystal Fighting Fantasy, Rihanna. Wow, I didn't know that was still a thing. So I wonder how well they go down. Interesting. I'm gonna have to revisit those. I think they're going to be quite good fun. Right. Anyway, so we never got anywhere close. So congratulations, everybody. In terms of keeping me off the topic of the day. We haven't even got close to the topic of the day. But I'm kind of quite glad, because these streams are very informal, so that's not a problem. The topics will last for the future. It's sometimes nice just to have a free-ranging discussion on various things. And it's been great actually tonight to have a few new folks on talking about, from the perspective of teaching and communicating creative ideas to children, all that kind of stuff. That's really, really good. And the maybe this is a fighting fantasy novel. The chat decides where the story's going to go. What was the topic? I can't remember. No, we didn't even get to the topic. The topic was going to be about medicine, actually. Medicine in space, science fiction and fantasy. So maybe we'll pick that up next week. I didn't even get to announce the topic. Yeah, that's how much waffling we did. But it was good. These are very organic environments, and it's good just to chill out. There was a topic? No, we never got anywhere near it. So But we'll try that. That's fine. Yeah, traditional end of stream topic. We might do this topic next week. We'll see how it goes. Dear, it's all good. It's all good. But it's it's good to be organic. Let's not pre-plan everything, because sometimes let's just go with the flow. It's much better. So there we go. Anyway. Damn it, Jim Benson's in space. Yes, he's dead. So that is a topic. That is the next topic. We'll see how we go. But I'm gratified. Genuinely, I mean, one of the things that it's in the back of my mind as somebody who's written a few books and been moderately successful at writing books and stories and things, and conscious that I was given a bit of a break by that English teacher all those years ago. I'd like to encourage anybody of any age, of any creed, race, colour, blah 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 blah. To try their hand at writing, because we need more creative stories. We see so many reboots of things that have already been done. There's surely there's that people out there who can write some new stuff, and there are. And I'd really just like to encourage that as much as I can. That's kind of ultimately the purpose of these streams. I think it's just how are we all doing with our own creative projects, and B, can we get more people doing more creative stuff, because this is good. And what do you need to do to get creative stuff done, and some of the technicalities that ensue from that. So that's kind of what we're all about. So hopefully that will make sense. Waffle time, achievement unlocked, divert 100% of topic time to whatever's going on in the chat. So there we go. You say, Haunted Love, you say you're not a pantster, but on Twitch you so I suppose my Twitch persona is entirely 100% diametrically opposed to what I do actually when I'm writing. I am a total plotter when it comes to writing books, but on Twitch I do have a bit of a plan, but it very really for Twitch streams, but it very 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 rarely works out. But there we go. Hollywood needs new stories, but will they look for new stories? See, there you go. Well, that's what's nice about the fact that the internet and things democratizes content to a degree. Yes, there are still gatekeepers out there, of course, but if you've got a bit of talent, you're prepared to put in some hard work, and you want to have a go at it, you can publish a book all on your own. It can be done. You can get it out there. You can get your story out to the world. It is all doable, so go for it. That's what I say. Anyway, my friends, I must carry on and go and get some rest, because the only problem with the whole jaw business is after an hour and a half of talking, it does actually start to hurt. Andy Weir, so there's a good example. That's a really good example. The Martian and all that kind of good stuff. A absolute blockbuster seller. Great story. Really, really good. I enjoyed it myself. Breaking that. We'll only do things that have been shown to be successful because of money, right? Don't do it for the money. You can do it for whatever creative reason you can come up with. Go try and be as creative and inspire more people to be creative. This is very, very important. So anyway, there we go. Anyway, my friends, thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Please come back and contribute to the next issue. We'll try and get to the topic next week and talk about medicine and fantasy and sci-fi novels and all that sort of stuff. Too much jaw, yeah, absolutely. Too much talking, too much grinning as well. Yeah, I must stop grinning. I'm maybe much more serious and po-faced. But anyway, take care, my friends. See you later on the week for some of the game playing stream stuff. And obviously always back here on Monday evenings for more writing chat from all you lovely creative folks. Go out there and be creative. And have a fantastic week ahead. Be good. Take care, my friends. Write on as always, okay? That's the important thing. If you write just one word or 10,000 in a week, just keep writing. That's the thing. Be good. See you soon. And take care of yourselves. Bye-bye now.